when I talk to individuals, I find that more and more people want to have specifics. So when I say the environment, sometimes it's too broad. So tonight, when I talk about Amendment 1, I'm going to try to be specific about things that we could see that will change in the event that we would adopt Constitutional Amendment 1. I came here tonight as a spokesperson for Missouri's Food for America. It's the group that has organized the coalition to vote no on Constitutional Amendment number 1. That coalition is made up of family farmers like myself, because that's another way that I come here tonight as a family farmer. My brother does most of the farming. He'll tell you I'm not there much. I don't practice law, but I still get to claim that. I still go out and work the farm as often as I can. And I come here to talk to you a little bit about why I think we should all rally together to oppose Constitutional Amendment number 1. One of the exciting things about the coalition is that we've been able to pull together and mass together a population that's not worked together in the past. And as a matter of fact, it's been because we've not come together that oftentimes we've seen horrible things happen to our environment, or bad things happen to animals, or seeing family farmers driven from the farm. Because as individual organizations, individual interest groups, we have fought the fight, but we have done so in silos. As a matter of fact, oftentimes the Farm Bureau and the others who support Missouri's Constitutional Amendment number 1, they've actually convinced each of us that we're the bad guys. The other ones are the bad guys. The enemy is the environmentalists. The enemy, they tell the family farmer, or the enemy is the animal welfare people. They paint the animal welfare people and environmentalists oftentimes that with a broad brush that, these are all the bad people as farmers. One of the things we've been able to do very quickly in Missouri is to put aside our differences and find some common ground. What is that common ground? Why should we rally together on August the 5th and vote no on Constitutional Amendment number 1? Well, why should you even get up and go out and vote? Because only about 18 to 20% of the people are going to vote on the Constitutional Amendment. 18 or 20%. So one reason to get up and go is because your vote's worth about 5. If you kind of do that math, most people are going to sit at home. So if you really want to make an impact with your vote this time, just vote. It has power like it hadn't before. And why should you vote? It's your Constitution. A group of individuals on a national scope are attempting to pass right-to-farm bills across the Midwest states. I worked with the coalition in Oklahoma, and we killed it in the Senate in Oklahoma. We were able to change it from a constitutional provision to a statutory provision in Indiana. This is a national agenda to change state constitutions so the largest corporations in this country and in the world, some of them foreign corporations, are able to come into states and demand the opportunity to do their kind of industrialized agriculture without restriction. It's your Constitution. What's worse is they're asking to put this right in our Bill of Rights in Missouri State Constitution. So why should you care? It's your Constitution. It's the people's law. I learned that. My 7th grade teacher taught me that, right? The Constitution belongs to the people. It's not a place for corporations to gain power over people, farmers, the environment, animals. The other reason is because one vote equals about 5, because not very many people are going to go to the polls. There are 2 provisions in Constitutional Amendment number 1 you need to really focus on. First of all, and they're both deceptive. Because the other side can't win if they go out and say, well, this is for, the Attorney General today was at least honest in his support in Springfield for this provision. He believes, according to him, and the Farm Bureau and Missouri Farmers Care that was campaigning for this down there in Springfield, I just left Springfield to get here, is that there should just be one set of rules for all of agriculture. He doesn't believe in local control. One deception in this amendment is it says, except for those powers granted to local governments under Article 6 of the state constitution. Well, understand, every county in the state, except for the very largest ones who have charter forms of government, will lose their rights to regulate health and welfare laws for their citizens. Mark Twain Lake, here's where we get specific. Mark Twain Lake, I helped a community, a large hog factory, CAFO was going in up there. They were going to be built within 670 feet of the Mark Twain Lake water. Was going to be 10 million gallons of hog poop stored in a lagoon. 15 counties, to include my home county, to include my farm, gets their water out of Mark Twain Lake. And we said that's too high of a risk. It's our drinking water, it's the environment, it's the lake, it's the fish. You can see how quick Tyson killed off 100,000 fish. Can you imagine 675 feet from Mark Twain Lake? So we went to the local county governments and we said, look, this is not in the best interest of the citizens' health and welfare. And based upon the laws granted to the counties by state statute, they put a green zone around Mark Twain Lake. It's good for the campers. It's good for my drinking water. It's good for the environment. It's good for the fish. There's a lot of reasons that worked well for us. If this passes, that exception does not cover that county, and we'll lose those safeguards for the neighbors, the animals, and the environment. Article 6 of your state constitution only grants third-class counties, fourth-class counties, second-class counties the authority that they've been given by the state's legislature. And I learned in 7th grade the Constitution trumps state statute. So they don't have any exceptions in this provision. The urban legislators put that exception in because it protected them. First-class counties with charter forms of government are exempted from the impact of this. But we're not. Des Moines Register editorial 4 weeks ago, editors came out against industrialized agriculture. Citizens of Des Moines are going to spend $4 million to revamp their public water treatment plant, and $1 million a year in operating funds to clean the hog poop out of their drinking water. Iowa decided to go with just EPA standards and took off all those other ones years ago and became the #1 state for hogs and laying hens. And now they pooped up their water so much, it's costing the citizens of the towns to clean up the water. The editorial board there asked the question, why is it that the citizens of this town have to pay for the cost of industrialized agriculture out there in the countryside? If this passes, that story will be true here in Missouri. The second deception is, when you read the ballot language, when you go in there to vote, it says citizens' right. You read the actual language, it doesn't say citizen. It says farming and ranching. And the reason is, if it said citizens, the largest corporations wouldn't gain any rights. We citizens already have a right to farm. We already have a right to farm. It was passed in 1975 in the Family Farm Corporation Act. Family farmers are defined in Missouri. We were granted the right to farm. You can't move to my farm, next to my farm, and sue me out of business. You can't zone me out of business. Family farmers are protected, but large corporations, foreign corporations are not. The legislature and the proponents say, well, Maxwell's just wrong on that. And 2 editorials down in Jeff. I always like when they start attacking me, and means I'm probably winning. And I've got some experience in winning. And so they said, well, that's not right. If it's not right, why did the legislature in 2013, why did they have to pass an exception to the Family Farm Act to allow China to buy Smithfield? 50,000 acres. Why? Because the Missouri law prevents that competition for family farmers. We're protected, they're not. They gave an exemption so that deal could go through. Billions of a dollar deal. Today, if this passes, it will remove all the exemptions for foreign corporations to be able to compete. family farmers like myself. Why in 1975 did the legislature provide the protection? Because Japan and Spain, due to manipulation of the money market, the money exchange, they were able to come in here with cheap dollars, drive up the cost of farmland, and buy up big hunks of the farms. For farmers that stayed in business, it artificially drove up the value of their property, and they could no longer pay the property tax. The legislature came in and said, look, we don't want foreign currency to be able to be manipulated and compete with our farmers. Why protect farmers in this instance? It's your food. It's a food security and a food safety issue. Every consumer should care about that. That exemption will be raised and lifted, and we will then be subject to having the same thing that we stopped in 1975 occurring in Missouri, except it will be New Zealand with dairy and China with pork. If you read the ballot language, it says citizen. If you read the language itself, it doesn't say citizen. So two deceptions that we have to overcome. Today in Missouri, our state has adopted environmental standards to ensure that we have proper manure management plans for the construction of confined animal feeding operations. The state of Missouri has chosen to increase the standards above the EPA standards. To me, that's a good thing. There's further setbacks, there's other safeguards. It's not just good for the environment, it's also good for the neighbors out in the countryside. If you've ever been by one of those big hog or chicken houses and smelt them, you want to kind of understand, I ought to have property rights too on my property. I ought to be able to say, I should be able to open my windows on my house and not have to smell the neighbors all their hog poop. It's also good for the environment to make sure that we don't apply so much of that liquid manure that the nutrients leach into our groundwater or run off into our streams, killing our fish and other animals, and creating the algae blooms in our lakes like they're having to deal with in Lake Erie, Chesapeake Bay, North Carolina's dealing with it, Minnesota's dealing with it. So Missouri has taken steps to provide greater safeguards through the environmental DNR laws. If this passes, then there will be litigation as to whether or not those are reasonable, and as happened in other states, we will see us moving back down to equalize, as Attorney General Koster said, to have just one law. So these big foreign corporations and multinational corporations can have the same law in Iowa, the same law in Missouri, the same law in Oklahoma. The last time I checked, I wasn't here to support multinational foreign corporations' expansion of factory farming in the United States. I think it's reasonable for states to set their own standards for their quality of their drinking water, for the environmental standards, for safeguards for the neighbors, and I think it's appropriate for local governments, our counties and cities, to be able to set safeguards for their particular situation. That's why I oppose Constitutional Amendment number 1. I believe that it will allow for the abuses of corporate greed to exhibit itself here in this state, whether that's upon the farmers themselves, whether that's upon the animals, or whether that's upon our drinking water or the environment. We will go backwards and not forward with the quality of life that we have here in our great state. Be happy to answer any questions.